Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we're going to play with a bunch of different stencils and paints and also some watercolor powders and perhaps some regular watercolors too. I wanted to just play with stencils because I know not everybody has a Gelli plate. We like to use that a lot to make our cards, but you know, if you don't have it or you don't want the mess, there are definitely ways you can get that mixed media look without having one. So that's what I'm going to show you how to do today. This video is brought to you by TopFlightStamps.com. You can find these stencils, paints, and powders I'm using on their website, and I'll have links to those down below along with a coupon code, so make sure you check that out. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put a background on a couple of these papers. So what I did here, I just had some printmaking cards. You can use cardstock, it doesn't really matter, or like heavyweight paper, poster board watercolor paper, anything like that. And I just taped them down to these boards with washi tape. Now, Washi tape's a really low tack tape, and the reason I'm using this is so hopefully it won't tear my paper underneath, because I want to build this right on my my backgrounds. So you can use paintbrushes, you can use tissues to wipe your paint across. We're going to keep it really simple because you probably don't have a brayer unless you have a Gelli plate. So I want to make sure that, you know, this is kind of like inclusive. So I'm giving a little bit of this just really light kind of truffle paint here. And I'm going to put a little bit, I think I'll do a little bit of this weathered copper in here, just a soft green. And yeah, we'll do a little bit. I don't want too much of that one on the other one there. And I'm also going to I'm going to put some blues into one of these. Now, you don't need to have fancy supplies to make art. And hopefully, if you've been following my channel for any amount of time, you realize that. I'm going to do a little bit of this brown shed, which is kind of like a reddish brown on this one. Hopefully you realize that if you've been following my channel for any amount of time. So now what I'm going to do is just take a paper towel. You could even take like a piece of newspaper. It doesn't really matter. Fold it up. All right? And what we're going to do is we're just going to swipe, and we're going to cover the background. So when we do that technique on the Gelli plate that I showed you a couple weeks ago, where we kept layering and layering and layering, and then at the end we pulled the print off. Well, with that one we worked kind of back to front, or we did what was going to be on the front first, and then we just kept piling on, and then we put like kind of an overall coating on the back to kind of pull it all up. Well, we're doing that first. Okay, so just kind of coat it on there. You're going to let that dry. You're going to do the same thing here. And you're just basically making, you're filling it with color and a little bit of texture from our paper towel marks. You could even press like plastic wrap in this if you wanted to, or a plastic bag if you wanted to give it kind of that, that marbly texture. But I just want this to be really easy. Now, one thing you want to keep in mind when you do this is what side the fold of your card is on. And a lot of times I'll put a little arrow on the board that I tape it down onto to make sure you don't make your card upside down. But we will be, we'll be taking the tape off before we're all done putting our card together. So if we do have it taped upside down, it won't really make a difference. All right, so now we've got some texture on the background. What we want to do, just make sure it's all covered really well, and then we're going to let this dry. Now, you can speed it up with a hair dryer if you want to, or you can let it dry naturally. It's up to you. Now, I would recommend that you do as many of these backgrounds as you want. So if you know you want to make 4 cards, prepare 4 backgrounds, and then we will come back when this first layer is dry. All right, our background is dry. Now, if you do decide to speed the drying along with a heat tool, be very careful because acrylic paint can blister. These paper artsy paints are a matte paint, so they're less likely to blister, but they dry a lot quicker too because they don't have the gloss. For some reason, it seems like the gloss in acrylic paint is what takes a longer time to dry. So this is a darkroom door stencil. It comes with a stencil and a mask, so this can be handy if you want to protect something and paint over it, but I'm actually going to use a stencil. And I'm going to probably just put a simple like sentiment on here, like maybe like a congratulations or something like that, because you know it's graduation season and whatnot. So I'm just deciding how I want my stencil, if I want my star to be straight up and down, if I want it to be curved. I think I'm going to have it straight up and down, but I'm going to have it kind of off center. And then what I'm going to use is a makeup sponge. They work so well for stenciling, and you can wash them out. So I've had that asked me before, so there's a couple ways to do it. I'm going to use a dark navy, and the reason for that is because I want to do the stars in a contrasting color, and I just want this big star kind of to be like, and you don't need a lot, to be a little bit darker so I can layer. So I got a mid-tone here in my background with all those mixed colors. Now I'm going to do a dark, and I'm just pouncing the bottom of my sponge here in this, and then I'll do the stars in actually a metallic. I think that will be pretty. So you just want to pounce up and down, and look, I'm just getting paint on that bottom. So something you can do instead of washing this out, which, you know, that can be a little, you might forget, right? Or it's going to take a little time. It's going to take some water. And, you know, let's just be honest, often we just forget, right? So if you just get the paint on that bottom area, you can actually take scissors and just cut that off when it dries, and then you can keep doing that until you're like halfway through the sponge. So it's a great way to get a little more mileage from these, so you don't have to throw them away. Now they are inexpensive. I get mine at the dollar store, but I like to be mindful about how much is going into the garbage. I don't like to throw away stuff if I don't have to. I don't want to have stuff end up in the landfill. So that's just my quick tip for saving these and getting a little more bang for your buck if you forget to wash them. And there we go. So that gives us a nice clean star. Now we're going to have to let that dry. And while that's drying, I want to do my bottom layer on my one of the other backgrounds here that I have prepared. So for this one, oh, and by the way, you can just, you know, wipe this off with a baby wipe or a wet rag. Honestly, with a stencil like this, it's big and open. If it's an acrylic paint, I just let it dry. I don't bother cleaning it, but it's up to you. You do whatever you want to do. I'm just going to set that aside, not on anything important. And I'm going to grab my other stencil. I've got this one right here. We've got dots and it's got vines, which is a really nice variety of textures. And I think I'm going to use this green color over here where I've got some red underneath. Use a little bit out there, and I'm going to get a fresh sponge, and I'm just going to pounce that on the same way. You want to make sure you don't have a lot of paint on here. Just go straight up and down, and you might have to go over an area a couple times to get it to go through the holes. You can use a stencil brush. Definitely wash that stencil brush out, because, you know, you don't want to be throwing those away. They're a little too expensive for that. But the key is not to have a lot of paint and not to let your stencil shift. You could tape it down if you wanted to, but I find that stencils that are nice and thick like these don't really need it. They're not wiggling around on you too much. Some people like to spray like a pixie mist, I think it's called, pixie spray, which is just a low tack spray adhesive on the back of their stencils, so they're just kind of always sticky, but I don't bother with that. There we go, it gives us a little texture there. I think I'm going to flip it around and do just a little bit up here as well. I'm going to try not to get the back of the dots in that wet paint I just stenciled. And you don't have to have like a really uniform coverage. You can keep moving around, just kind of do bits of your stencil here and there. And it just gives you a really nice texture. Okay, so now what I want to do, I'm just going to set this aside with my sponge. Now I'm going to add some metallic. And I'm just going to zap this with a heat tool really quick. And the paint that I'm going to use will just be this gold metallic paint that I have. I don't know if the Paper Artsy makes a metallic. Generally your metallics are going to have more gloss in them, so they have that more reflective property. And we are going to grab another sponge. When you have a little lacy design like that too, it doesn't take very long to dry. The star will take a little bit longer because it was a little bit more of an area that, you know, we were able to layer on. So take a little bit of the gold. Whoops. Need to open that up. I've never used this before, apparently. I go through gold quite a bit, so I probably just finished up a bigger bottle of it. Don't need much. And so now I'm going to do the circles from that stencil. And we'll just do it here and there, I think. I like to keep my background taped down till I'm done all of the background treatment because I want that white border. So before I remove that tape, I will be heating up the background, mainly to make sure my paint's all dry so I don't end up smearing anything, but also because if you use a heat tool or a hair dryer on the, oh, it's kind of pretty. If you use that on a, like over a tape or an adhesive, it'll keep it from ripping the paper for the most part. And cardstock is more fragile than like watercolor paper or Bristol or other, you know, wet media paper, so you want to make sure that you're not going to tear it up. Okay, now if you want, you can also take some of that and you could like kind of streak it around here and there, because sometimes I don't like how abruptly a stencil ends, so I'll just kind of integrate it a little bit. Oops, I should set that down because can't see what I'm doing when I got that there. Just give it a little bit of a frame. And this is a great way to disguise if you make a mistake and like you end up smudging something. We'll just swipe some metallic on. It's going to look really good. So I got to let that dry. So I'll set that aside and we'll finish up with our star. Again, we're going to use gold. And we're going to go back to that star stencil. And this one's nice because it actually kind of does the work for you. You don't have to move your stencil around and guess where things need to go. A lot of times I'll just kind of grab a stencil, I'll just kind of keep moving it and overlaying and maybe even using a couple stencils, but with this, I don't even need to do that. I'm using the same gold sponge I used on the other one. And we're just gonna pounce here. Going right over the tape. Don't worry about the tape at all. I hope this isn't boring. This is probably like, this is probably a little dull for some of you. You've done it before. One thing I really wanted to work out here today, not only just playing with stencils with limited supplies, oh, that's pretty. I also wanted to see how my sound deadening went. I've been fiddling around in my new space. Now, this is tricky because I don't want to get, I should have done this bottom part first. Well, no, that wouldn't have mattered. I don't want to get paint, I don't want to smudge what I've already stenciled, but I think I can kind of hold it up a little bit. The gold's a little sheer, but because it's reflective, I think it's going to be fine. And this is just a background, remember. We're going to have some fun doing our foreground pieces. I think you're really going to like them. And again, you can use whatever you have. So you don't have to have this brand of paint. You can use whatever brand of paint you have. You know, get creative with the supplies you have. Stencils are such a versatile supply. You can use them with so many different things, from markers to chalk to acrylic paint to gouache, you know, spray paint, spray mists. That's really neat looking, I think. All right, and I'm going to leave the edge clean on that one. So now we let those dry. And we will start on with our foreground elements. Now we're going to have a different type of fun with stencils. We're going to use some watercolor powder and some watercolor paint. So if you have either of these products and you felt a little like, oh, I don't know what to do, hopefully this will help. Now I've just chopped down some watercolor paper. It's nice to take out like a sheet of 9x12 paper, chop it down to like, I think this is 3x4, 3x4.5. So you've got little pieces and they're less intimidating. Now this paper is rough on one side, smooth on the other. You can use either side. I used smooth papers, the smooth side on these two. So I think I'll do it with the rough side this time so you can see the difference. Might as well, right? Why do it the same way twice? Okay. If you're stamping, it's a good idea to use a smooth side because you'll get better detail, but with this technique, it really doesn't matter. So the first thing I'm going to do is we're going to do kind of like a little bit of a no-line watercolor here. Now I'm just going to wipe this a little bit because I was using a pen on this, and I just want to make sure I'm not going to get a bunch of that on my my paper. So I'm just going to set that down. And what I'm going to use are those two flowers. Okay, so I'm going to be spraying water over this, and I don't want the water to get in the other holes of the stencil. So I'm just going to mask it off with some Post-it tape, and you can use paper. You could use regular masking tape. You can use whatever you have It doesn't matter. In fact, I think something that's not paper-based might work a little bit better because this tends to want to just dissolve when it gets hit with water. So it doesn't matter. You can use whatever you happen to have. And I like the little speckles because this stencil has kind of like a distressed feeling to it. So what I want to do is I want to spray kind of over it so I get just a really light mist. Okay, but the lines are small, so you have to spray it a couple times. This is just a very fine spray mist bottle. And then I'm going to actually remove these Post-it notes. I can use them again, Post-it tape, before it starts to stick to the stencil. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of this red, this is Sunset Beach Infusions powder, and I'm just going to give it a little tap. Okay, so what I've done, by the way, these have little screw top bottles. Don't unscrew the top because you're going to get too much powder. Take a tack and poke it in there and then just kind of tap on the bottom, and that is going to give you more than enough powder. All right, so then I'm just going to kind of tap it around a little bit, and you're like, Lindsay, you know, that's kind of lame looking. There's not really much going on there. What are you trying to pull? Watch this though. I'm just going to take a water brush. Let me just squirt a little bit of water out there. And by the way, I'm working on a silicone mat because all that extra powder, if you get that on your table, it is going to make such a mess. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add some water and kind of drag that powder around. So if you've got these pigment powders and maybe you're kind of at a loss on what to do with them, this is a great way you can get kind of like a no-line watercolor look without having to draw, without having to have any training. It's just a fun way to use your supplies. You can freehand around a little bit once you've got the base. It's kind of just like training wheels, right? Training wheels for your watercolor. You can add an extra petal on there if you want. You know, have fun with it. Okay, and you can just play with that design a little bit until you get the petals that you like. All right, so now what I'm going to do, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit here for you since that's a pretty small area. I'm going to clean my water brush. You could just squeeze it out on a paper towel. That works too, but I have a cup of water, so it's a little easier. And I'm going to grab some green watercolor paint, and I'm going to just paint a couple stems. And if you don't have watercolors, you can take watercolor markers or ink pads and press them down on your silicone mat or acrylic block or whatever you have, and you can just lift that up. And that will give you like a little watercolor palette. For the amount that you need for this project, that will certainly do the trick. If you want to boost any colors, you can do that with the ink pads like I mentioned. You can also use a little watercolor paint. You can also liquefy any of the leftover like Brusho or Infusions powder there. I know Top Flight just recently restocked on these, so they should have all the colors. I like the Infusions powder because they have several colors in each bottle, so you get this really pretty burst of colors. Now something else I like to do is spatter on some color, and again, you can do this with your ink pads by pressing it onto your mat and adding some water, or you can use watercolors, and you got to make sure that you have enough color here. And what I'm going to do is just kind of flick it on. And it's okay if it gets into the other wet paint and it blends around a little bit. That's totally fine. And I like to actually go and add a little bit of color to the edges. Don't worry if you get a big blob, okay? If you just end up like with a big blob and you can't even tell that they're flowers anymore, don't worry. I'm going to show you how to fix that. It's totally fine. It's not gonna bother anything. And I'm going to add a little bit of green down here. You can be very messy with this and it's still going to look great. So you want to set that aside to dry, and then you want to clean up your mess. I'm just going to set those out of the way for a second. I'm going to wipe, spray and wipe, and we're going to prepare our next panel. So this is going to be another way that you can use your products here. And we're going to use all three of these colors. You can use whatever colors you happen to have. I am using a Sunset Beach, which is a red to orange mix, Golden Sands, which is a bunch of yellows to orange, and Black Currant, which is purpley, a little bit of blue, a little bit of red. And we're going to grab another panel and set that on our mat. You can use whatever you want to protect your surface. Okay, we're zoomed in, so that's good. That's going to help you see. And then this stencil has a bunch of different butterflies on it. And they're the same butterfly, just in different arrangements. And I like these three here because they're not perfectly lined up. I think that's kind of cute. And I'm just going to set that down on my paper like that. And again, I'm just going to put my hand over those other two butterflies to cover it. And I'm going to, again, spray with water. I'm trying not to get it on my, I would move your little bottles of pigment out of the way so you don't accidentally spray on the tops, because then your stuff is going to get stuck to them. Hopefully I didn't have any ink. I had a little bit of ink on there, but it's not going to be a problem. And this time I'm going to put my colors down kind of in like a rainbow order. I'm going to start with yellow at the, whoa, that yellow comes out fast. A little yellow at the top, a little kind of reddish to orange in the middle. That's a little bit slower. And you always get, I mean, it's super pigmented, so you don't need to put too much. And then my purple down at the bottom. All right. And then I'm just going to tap it around, make sure it gets covered everywhere. Now this time, I'm actually going to spritz over the entire thing, because there'll be a lot of residual color that is on that paper that you might not even notice. Now I can let the colors drip. This is going to be more of an abstract. You're probably like, oh no, Lindsay, you're losing your design. And that's all right. If I lose my design, I lose my design. It's not the end of the world, because I'll know how to line it back up. I just want to get this covered really well. Okay. And don't worry if you can't see where your butterflies are. You can see the bottom one kind of there and the top one kind of there, but we're gonna be fine. So I need to let these backgrounds dry. I'm gonna clean up my mess, and then we're gonna come back and finish up our panels and then put our card together. Okay, we have our dry panels now, and this is kind of where the fun happens. So what you want to do is really important. See how my stencil is wet? You want to dry that off. I use my jeans because I find that if I try to clean this with a paper towel, I always get like bits of paper towel stuck on my stencil, but if I just wipe them on my jeans, it dries them up really good. And if there's just water on there, you shouldn't have any problem with your clothing. And then what we're going to do, we'll do this one first because this is a little bit simpler. We're going to line our stencil back up, okay, as best you can. And that looks pretty good. Now, don't worry if you've drawn some extra blooms that aren't there. We're going to deal with that. So I'm going to use a waterproof pen. And the reason I like to use a waterproof pen is because if I change my mind and want to go back in with some more watercolor, I don't have to worry about it smearing on me. This is a micron 1mm pen. And because this stencil has pretty big, not really big, but it's got a big enough line on it, I can use this. This pen's too big for the butterfly one to use it in the stencil, but that's why I'm recommending this one for your first one, just because it's really easy to get that pen in there. And I also find these thick lines really add a lot of structure. So if your background with the infusions got really kind of crazy looking, it's going to bring it back. It's going to bring it back to where, okay, this is a flower. We know what we're doing here. And even if you don't have it lined up just right, like I'm wondering if I might not have this lined up just right, it should still be fine. Okay, so you get your basic lines in there. Yeah, I didn't have that very well lined up, but that's okay because I can go in there. This might turn from a poppy into a peony, I think, because I've got a lot of extra petals, but look at that, that's fine. That's fine. You just go in and you add some extra lines. I might have also had the wrong side of the stencil up, but it doesn't matter because I can just go in and add a few lines here and there. So there, that gives it so much more oomph. And I can add some accent lines on the grass, just define the ones you're proud of, right? If you see a line that you really like, outline that one. And you see lines you don't care for, don't bother with them, just let them be. And that's how we do that one. That's all there is to it. This is the one I did on the smooth side of the paper. I don't think it really makes that much of a difference. It just depends on the texture that you like. And then for our butterflies, what we're going to do, this actually still feels a little bit damp, so I'm going to dry this just for a second. If your paper feels, if you touch it and it feels cool to the touch, it's not dry yet, and if it feels soft, like if this part's dry, I can tell that it's nice and crispy. This part down here is really soft and bendy. So I want to dry that, because if I try to use my Micron pens on paper that's not dry yet, it's going to, like, the moisture's going to get into the pen and the pen's not going to work. So you don't want to do that. Now you'll also notice that your paper's getting a lot lighter as it dries. So if you're kind of a little worried that you've just done a background and you're like, oh my gosh, it's so bright, what am I going to do? It's way too bright. Don't worry, when it dries, it's going to shift. The wetter your paper, the more it's going to shift. So I just dried this off on my pants, like you do, and I'm just going to try to line that back up a little bit. Was it? Now I'm confused. Okay, yeah, it was this one. So I'm just trying to see what butterfly can I see the most and try to line that one up, and then get it fairly lined up. And now I need a smaller pen. Let me cap that Micron up before I get too far, because these do not like to be uncapped. This is it's a waterproof ink, but it's not alcohol based. So what I'm going to do is actually just get kind of an outline. I'm not trying to get every detail, because I want to do some kind of freehand lines with this. If you don't want to do freehand, you could just do your little lines with a fine pen and then go in with your thick pen and go in the thick lines. But when you get to those smaller butterflies, the lines are just too small to do that too. This one I'm just gonna kind of just make little dots, just so I have my bearings of where things are. There's been so many butterflies this year. I don't know if you've noticed it where you are, but I've noticed a lot more butterflies when I'm walking in the morning and out in the backyard. I think it's so nice. I like seeing nature thrive. So just making some dots, just so I can have an idea of where this butterfly is, and just for perspective, or symmetry, I should say. I peek under there. Yeah, that's enough that I can tell. Okay, then I'm going to go back to that nice thick pen, because I think that gives me a really cool definition. Remember, this is waterproof, so I can add... Oh, you know what I want to use? Actually, no, I want to use a brush pen, because that's going to give me even more of an expressive line. So I'm just using little flicking strokes. I'm going to do squiggles. Try to keep it symmetrical, and just try not to get too complicated so that you can repeat it. You don't want to have one that was like really hard to do and you're like, oh, I don't want to do that again. You know, just have fun with it. So there we have just some basic strokes. So then what I'm going to do, because I feel like I've got the sharp darkness of the pen and I've got the really swooshy background, I want to have something else happening in here. So what I'm going to do is, hopefully that's dry enough. Give it time. You know, I'm going a little quickly because I don't want to bore you. Then you can go in, you can take colors from your watercolor and just add some watercolors to it. Use some. You can also flick any of those colors on there that you like. Do a little bit of purple. And you can be as artsy or as controlled as you want. I think you just have fun with it, play with those stencils, and you'll come up with some really fun backgrounds. All right, so now let's put our cards together. I have made a few. I'm just gonna set this aside. That's out of the way. I can clean this later. And let's grab the backgrounds that we made. So here are the two backgrounds that we made. I took the tape off. I did have a little bit of peeling of my paper, so just make sure that you heat up your paper, your tape with a hairdryer. If you're not using like a watercolor paper, it just helps it from getting, you know, from getting ruined. And let's grab a couple of our panels here. This one's dry, so I'll grab this one. Oh, you know what? Do I want that one there? Do I want this one there? There's so many different ways that you can do this. In fact, you could even cut out the butterflies and do that as well. In fact, I think that would be really fun to do that. So let me grab my scissors. I think that would look really cute to cut those out. So I'm just going to be very loose with this. It does seem kind of like a shame just to waste all that background, doesn't it? Maybe I'll wish I hadn't done it after I do it. You never know. But it's like, oh, I really like that. You know what? I don't think I'm going to use a butterfly one. I don't think I'm going to use that one. I don't think so. I've got some sentiments that I think would look really cute. What I did was I just took just some sentiment die cuts and I cut them out on some black cardstock that I had put some double-sided tape on the back of so it would be ready to glue down. And let's just stick this panel down. Sometimes, you know, you like a background so much you just don't want to cover it, and that's kind of what you know, I was like, you know, I feel like the butterflies are just going to take away from that. So let's see, on this we could do, I've got a thanks, I've got get well. Oh, that might be nice. Let's do get well. So like I said, this is just a score tape, and when I have scraps of black cardstock, I just put score tape on the back and I throw them in my die cut box. And then when I need to cut out a sentiment or something small, I'll use that because it will work really well for, oh, I want to get that little center out of the E. Works really well for sentiments, and then I don't have to try to glue them down with like a fine tip glue pen or something. Because I have a hard time with liquid glues. I don't know what it is. Let me know in the comments if you have a hard time with liquid glues as well. And I also like it because this is a thick cardstock, it's like the 110-pound Recollections cardstock. I like it because it's so thick that when you like die cut it, it gives you like a really great, oops, I got some paint on there. It gives you a really great like texture to it. So it's simple, but I really love the way that looks. Just stencils, you know, we didn't even have any stamps. So it's a very affordable way to get into card making. I think for this one, I'll do congratulations because I think like with a star, that looks like it could be like a graduation card. Oh, you know what? I think I got paint on my cardstock here. All right, so we'll peel that up. Now let's make sure that's gonna show up. I think it will. Let me get my little center out here. I hope you're enjoying this live narrated card. I never know because it's like, oh my gosh, sometimes I feel like I'm the slowest card maker ever. Congrats. I like that. I do have a little bitty in there. Gotta get out. I haven't moved my pokey tool over here yet. Oh, that's pretty. I like that. All right, and I think I'll add a little star. I think I'll add it right. Yeah, I kind of like it over the T. Even though it kind of looks like I'm like dotting an I, but I think it doesn't really look that much like I'm dotting an I. So I think it will be okay. Let me just give it a little adhesive. Hopefully this tape runner will do the trick because I don't have my glue over here. Because I did not think this project through far enough apparently. There we go. I think it's going to work just dandy. A glue dot would also be dandy. Oh gosh, I'm getting the middles. Your hands look like this when you're done crafting. Let's stick that right there. Oh, I like that. Okay, so I didn't end up using the butterflies, but I think that's cute. Hey, the butterflies give you an idea, right? You know what? Here's one. We can use the butterflies on this one. Let's do that so it doesn't go to waste. We'll use this one that we just did. I kind of feel like it's a little too big though. What do you think? It does seem to be a little on the big side. Let's see, what sentiment would I like? I got thinking of you. That's really nice. I've got hello. What if I trimmed it like that and used, or what if I can make use of both of these? Yeah, let's try to do that. I got my little trimmer here. That's how card making goes. You know, I feel like the actual making of the card, if I could put everything in order just right the first time, it would hardly take me any time at all. But because I've got to hem and haw and fuss around so much, it takes me quite a while. I hope I'm not the only one. I think I'll just, I kind of want to just do like, I want to stack a couple. Let's trim this side off a little bit, maybe. I really like the background. That's a thing. It's like, man, I don't want to cover up the background, but I also want to use the butterflies that I made. I don't know. Maybe cut this one. I'm just going to end up destroying this panel too, probably. I love the background. I think I got a little too loosey-goosey with drawing the butterflies on it. Do I like that? You know what? I kind of like just that. Would that work? What if I cut out that little tiny butterfly? We are chopping the butterflies. And I'm pretty sure I cut that crooked. But that's okay because I want to trim it out a little bit more. I tend to really like just like, it's always like the happy accidents, right? Like the background ends up prettier than the actual thing we're making. You guys find that? And it's like, well, yeah, the background looks great, but the thing I was actually trying for is a hot mess. Okay, that works. I think that works. I don't know. I think it works. You know what? Maybe I'll trim off a little bit of this mess on the end. I love that blue. It stands out so well. Yeah, and then we could put our sentiment there. Okay, that works. I like it. It's avant-garde. I'm feeling avant-garde today, so I'm going to make some avant-garde art. Oh, maybe I'll just bring that right up to the edge. So I'm kind of terrified that I'm going to get smudges on the corners of my card because that would be very typical. I don't have my rings on today because I had injured my hand walking the dog the other day. And I took my rings off because I was afraid that my hands would swell and then I would be like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Oh, you know what? I think I'll just use this little bit here. So I took my rings off in case my hand swelled. It hasn't really, I mean, a little bit, or maybe I want to use that little butterfly. I just don't know. In case you're wondering. I'm falling. Oh, I like that. Okay, let's do that. Let's do collage, man. That's where it's at. What are we going to use for a set? Did we decide we were going to use Thinking of You? Did we decide that? I don't know. At this point, I'm just talking to myself. I'm expecting you guys to answer. And I know some of you guys do. So thank you for that. I can hear it. I can hear it in my head. I can hear you guys saying, Lindsay, what are you thinking, girl? Oh, look at that little scrap that I didn't even intend to do anything with, but it's kind of gorgeous. So I'm going to cut that little tag off the side and we're going to use it because it almost seems like, you know, if I made it, I want to use it because I know I'm just going to toss it in the trash if I don't. So I might as well. Hey, man. I like that. That was so much better than either of just the butterflies on their own. So let's see. Will Thinking of You work good there? Maybe down there a little bit, actually. Or maybe a thanks. Or maybe a hello. Oh, I like the hello, I think. Let's do that. So the hello is in two parts. We got the H and the L-O. So let's get our L-O out first and get that placed because it'll be a lot easier to place the H than the L-O. Oh, see, if you don't have the wide score tape, you can use a couple pieces of skinnier double-sided tape too, so you don't have to have that thick. The wider the tape, the more expensive it is. I love that 2-inch tape. I find I use that one quite a bit, but but it's more expensive and probably not quite as convenient, or you're probably not going to use it as much as you would like the 1/4 inch or the 1/2 inch. So, you know, and once you know, it can get pricey. You get all these different sizes. That's why I want to just do stencils today and show you that you don't need to have a Gelli plate. You don't need to have like all the brand new latest and greatest. You can use what you have. You can experiment. You can use stencils. They're so much cheaper than stamps. So let's see, we'll do the Mellow. If I do my Mellow there, how will the H go? I feel like anything is gonna cover up my butterflies. I'll do it here. I know there's probably a better way to place these, because I always get them stuck to my fingers, and I always get the little bitties from the inside stuck to my fingers, but we muddle through, don't we? That's a moral, that should be my channel slogan. We muddle through. We'll get there eventually. So, you guys want me to go back to editing my videos and voicing them over yet? There we go. Oh, this is cute. You know what? Hey, it was a journey to get to this card, but I think it's pretty darn awesome. Look at that. That's cute. I like it. I'm happy with it. So there we go. We got a hello, we got a get well, and we got a congrats. And you know what? It's graduation time. We can use a congrats. Hello, that's great just to send to any friends, especially if we haven't had a chance to see our friends in a while. And we've got to get well because, you know, it's always good to have get well cards. Isn't that nice when you get a get well card in the mail if you're not feeling well? I think these are absolutely adorable. You can find the stencils I used at our sponsor, topflightstamps.com. Don't forget to grab that coupon code in the video description if you are going to do some shopping, and look through your stash. See the fun things that you have. These are called infusions. Those are the pigment powders that I used. They're a lot of fun. They're not very expensive, and you know, you only need a few colors, and you can do so much with just a few colors. Try to get like more basic colors. I would say go with more bright colors because you can always keep mixing them and getting them muddy, but you can't get them bright again. So I would say if you're limited, get a few bright ones. These paints, these paper artsy fresco paints are really chalky, kind of like gouache, but they are an acrylic. So once they're on there, they're permanent. They dry pretty fast, which is nice. Other than that, I used some watercolors, some cardstock, really not a lot of fancy stuff, some watercolor paper. I don't even think you'd really need watercolor paper for this technique because we're not really doing anything really elaborate with the watercolor paper. So try what you have. If that doesn't work, then you can go out and look. I'll have everything linked down below in the video description. I want to thank you so much for watching. Please give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video, and let me know in the comments below if you still like this long format, real-time method, or if you'd prefer me to go back to voicing over. Let me know. I'm curious. Hopefully the sound sounded okay because I am recording in my new space today. Again, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, happy crafting.